Dr. Julian Nava is a man who himself has seen the history of the Mexican American people, and he has lived it, and he has exemplified it in a very impressive way. So Dr. Julian Nava, we're honored to have you here today. Please join us. Please join us, sir. Such an amazing pleasure. Please have a seat right here. I would like to start by reading, and telling our friends a little bit about your path through history. And while we do that, we're going to be seeing some beautiful photographs, And so let's start with that. So you guys know, the amazing accomplishments that Dr. Julian Nava has had. He was born in Los Angeles to a Mexican immigrants in 1927 and is one of 8 siblings. Dr. Nava grew up in the barrio of East LA in 1945. He volunteered for the Air Corps of the United States Navy. Dr. Nava, along with other Rough Riders who had volunteered for the armed forces, was allowed to wear his Navy uniform for the Roosevelt High School graduation ceremony in 1945. Upon his return to Los Angeles, Dr. Nava studied at East LA Community College before transferring to Pomona College. After earning his undergraduate degree in history in 1951, Dr. Nava earned a PhD in Latin American history from Harvard University in 1955. He taught in Venezuela, Spain, Puerto Rico, Colombia, where he founded Centro de Estudios Universitarios in Bogotá. Dr. Nava was a professor of history at California State University in Northridge, and he is now professor emeritus of history. In 1967, the Congress of Mexican American Unity nominated him to run for the Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education. Dr. Nava became the first Mexican American to serve on the countywide board. He was elected 3 consecutive terms from 1967 to 1979. In 1980, he was appointed U.S. Ambassador to Mexico by President Jimmy Carter. He was the first Mexican American to hold the position. In 1992, he ran for mayor of Los Angeles. In 1993, Dr. Nava was a pallbearer at the funeral of the labor leader Cesar Chavez. Dr. Nava had worked with Chavez since his time with the community service organizations in Los Angeles immediately after the Second World War. In 2006, HBO film Walkout, the role of Dr. Julian Nava was played by director Edward James Olmos. Independently, Dr. Nava has produced several documentary films. He explores the history of the Basque people and songs of the Basque, funded by the Basque government. He then produced and co-directed Voices of Cuba with Todd Maddox. More recently, Dr. Nava produced a documentary on cross-border migration to and from the United States in 2 languages, Zacatecanos de Ida y Vuelta, Round Trip Zacatecanos. Dr. Nava greatly enjoys travel. Today, he's retired and lives in San Diego with his wife, Patricia. He holds the title of Professor Emeritus of History at CSUN. Dr. Nava lectures widely about multicultural education and serves on the board of directors of Encuentros, which promotes education among young Latino males. In 2011, a LSU school was named after him, Dr. Julian Nava Learning Academy. In 2014, another LSU school was named after him, the Nava College Preparatory Academy. In 2015, Dr. Nava published an historical novel, Taming the Chinese Dragon, Young Love in Changyin, Tibet. Wow, what an impressive career. Welcome, Dr. Nava. Welcome very much. A true history maker. Dr. Nava, you lived a very impressive life. We know your parents are from Zacatecas. We know that doing my research, I learned that your father was he had his own barber shop. So he was a successful Mexican American at the time. But unfortunately, in the 1930s, terrible times for Mexican Americans, terrible abuse against Mexican Americans. Your father lost his barber shop, and he ended up having to work as a ditch digger, right? So you experienced that. Tell us a little bit, how was that? How did that affect you in the way you have served our community for all these years?
Well, I'm American born, but it was by accident that I didn't grow up in Mexico, because during the Depression, everyone suffered, not just us. Everyone suffered. and Congress passed a law to reduce the population. And they decided to make it possible to pave the way back to the home country of populations that were in surplus, Congress thought, which included Japanese, Chinese, Italians, and Jews, and Mexican Americans, and other Latinos. And so our family decided to go back to Mexico because the American government would pay for our transportation. Well, I was about 8 years old, and we had a going away party where much of the neighborhood came to see us off, because there were 8 Nava children, 4 daughters and 4 sons, which meant that we all had a lot of friends. And someone brought a great big box of Baby Ruths, 3 levels. And so a couple of cousins and I grabbed that box from the kitchen counter. I could barely reach it. And we went out in the backyard and we ate the whole box. What a way to die.
Oh my God.
In fact, I almost did, because the next morning we were already all packed. We had disposed of everything from Dad's barbershop and furniture and Mother's washing machine, which she was so proud of. And all we had was what we could carry. And I developed a very strong stomach ache. And so my dad, who was familiar with medicine, because he liked to read, he took me to the hospital nearby just to make sure, because the next stop from LA was going to be Phoenix, about 7 hours on the train. And so sure enough, as soon as the young doctor examined me, I heard him on the phone. He called someone, and then a couple of nurses came by, took me away on a stretcher, and within an hour and a half, I had been operated on a ruptured appendix. Now, you may not know it, but you don't want a ruptured appendix because it spreads poisonous material throughout the inside. And so they jumped in, and I know they jumped in because I have a great big scar. It's supposed to be a small scar. It's a great big scar. And I survived. But the family had to stay here, which ruined us, because then we had to buy back almost everything that we had sold at a discount price. So that's how the Navas stayed in the United States, and how I then started going to local schools.
Right.
And had an experience that maybe many of the younger people here have had not had.
You lived in East LA, and at the time, East LA was different than it is today. Apparently, based on my research, East LA was a community that had a great variety of people. How did that affect your view of the world?
I was so lucky to grow up among different groups. There were Mexicans, Japanese, Jews, Italians, and a few Russians. And we all called each other by what we were. No, you're Japanese. You're Italian. Without any demeaning tone. That's what we were. And so I remember one time so vividly. On Fridays, we could sing for about half an hour. Every class in elementary school had to sing. They ought to do that now. It's very good for you. And Mrs. Strong, who was not fat, but she was kind of round and very jolly. Mrs. Strong said, we started singing Home on the Range and other standard American songs. And so she asked, how many of you know Allá en el Rancho Grande? I raised my hand. And about a fourth of the class raised theirs. And so we sang Allá en el Rancho Grande. All elementary school teachers had to be able to play the piano. And so she, da-da-da-dum, da-dum, allá en el Rancho Grande, allá donde vivía. And so it goes on, but I won't make you suffer.
Oh, no,
and so
sing it.
after we sang it, she said, oh, that's nice. Let's sing it again so the rest of the class can learn. She was very clever, huh? So we sang Allá en el Rancho Grande again. And then she said, you're so fortunate. Spanish is a beautiful language. And you know, I remembered that the rest of my life. You're so lucky. Spanish is a beautiful language. But that was so very different, for example, who from another teacher looked at it very differently. She caught me speaking Spanish to Rosita in the back of the classroom. I asked Rosita in Spanish, ¿Qué dijo la maestra? Because I was learning English in school. And so Rosita told me, dijo que this, that, the other. And Mrs. Aki, tall, blonde, good-looking, strong. Julian, come up here. So I went up to the front of the class and she said, you know the position. What's the position?
Probably.
You bend over and you grab your ankles.
Oh.
Everybody knew that. You don't know? Pobrecitos. and so, whack. And of course, when you're down grabbing your ankles, you don't have much balance, right? Boom. I went forward almost to the column. And she said very loud, speak English, Julian. You are an American. Well, no one else had ever called me an American. Coming to think of it, if someone asked me, who are you? I would say, I'm Julian, I'm Mexican. I didn't know I was American. And the third teacher in elementary school, which shaped me greatly, was Mrs. Benton. On a Friday, I went up to Mrs. Benton and told her, Mrs. Benton, I will not be in school Monday. Why not, Julian? We have to move. What do you mean you have to move? Mother sent the rent went up and it's too high. So we have to find another place to live. Oh, Julian, I'm so sorry. Will you make a promise to me? And I love Mrs. Benton. She's just a wonderful teacher. Sure. No matter whatever happens to you, always try to do your best, Julian. Those three teachers are my education.
And you still remember today.
Everything else had been added, but that was my education. Wow. And later in the semester, when we were singing, Mrs. Aki said, today, I'm going to play some music for you. So she turned around on her round stool, and she played this beautiful piece of music. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da da da, and it goes on. How come I remember it? And she turned around with tears in her eyes, and she said, you know, I was born in Finland, and our family came to the United States when I was 8 years old, my age. Mm-hmm. And I became American. And then, boom, I realized that she wasn't being mean to me. She loved me. And she was trying to help me. Julian, speak English. You're an American. You see what she meant? And so I grew up among minority groups, and it was always a benefit down to today.
Yeah, it's
In
very.
fact, coming to think of it, my first girlfriend was Betty Richland. Betty Richland, she was a Jewish girl, and all we could ever do on the front porch was to hold hands, because her mother would come out every now and then. And Betty was going to marry a Jewish boy that her parents would pick with the help of a yenta. How many of you know what a yenta is? A yenta is someone you pay to find you an appropriate husband or wife, and you pay them money. So Betty was going to marry when she graduated from high school, and she did, a very nice guy. So all we ever did was hold hands.
Wow, this is. When was this? What year?
38, 39.
So, at what time? I know that during the late 30s, 40s, there was a big desire by the Mexican American community and Mexican American boys, to go fight at the war, for some reason. And you end up being one of those brave men who went and saved the world, saved us, and you serve in the Navy. Tell us a little bit about why is it that at that time there was such a desire to go serve, and end up being, based on what I researched, end up being a very unusual number, a much higher number in comparison of Mexican American boys going to war. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was 17 when the war broke out, December 7th, and everyone felt so patriotic. And I think that among Mexican American men, and young men especially, they remembered the Depression and the fact that many of their friends and relatives were encouraged to go back to Mexico. It's like we were being discarded. And so they kind of felt, I want to show that I'm American. I love the United States, I'm American. And you felt that way without thinking it. You simply felt that way. So I enlisted when I turned just 17 and joined the Navy like my older brother. All the Mexican boys I knew joined the service. We were just so mad at Pearl Harbor because we felt as American as you can feel.
Yeah, and then apparently there was a big amount of gold stars in all those neighborhoods. What did that mean?
If a member of your family died during the war, your family was encouraged by the Defense Department. In fact, I think they supplied it. Big, beautiful gold star. It was about that big around, with a string on it, and you hung it on the front window of your house. So as you walked down the street, you could see gold stars. And there were many gold stars in Boyle Heights because young Mexican-American kids were pendejos. They volunteered for hazardous duty.
Yeah, they wanted to be brave and show.
It was natural.
Yeah.
I joined the Air Force and was a tail gunner on an airplane, which is a dangerous
It's
part.
a very dangerous. I can imagine all the Japanese Zeros following you.
They always attacked
shooting
from the
at
rear.
you.
So you didn't think of it, you just were patriotic. And I think it's in our genes, you guys. Mexican Americans during the Second World War by far earned the greatest number of Congressional Medals of Honors. Not Distinguished Service Cross, not a bunch of lower medals, medals of honor compared to all other groups. And why? Because those dumbbells are brave.
Because they're brave. Yeah,
They-
yeah. Thank you for your service. We're honored. We're honored. We're honored. And when you came back from serving our country, and you went to school, and I mean you achieved an education that that unfortunately not enough Mexican American boys were able to do at the time. You went to study in East LA College, then Pomona College, and then you were possibly one of the first Mexican Americans to earn a PhD in Harvard. How did that happen?
Well, Mexican American boys, I think, are no smarter or dumber than anyone else. What they accomplish depends on their family and the development of attitudes and values by which they feel good about themselves. And then that makes it more likely that they will want to achieve. Now, in the Air Force, for example, for the first time in my life, I learned that I can do anything that anyone else could do. I was Mexican. Friends were Italians, Poles, Swedes, Portuguese, German, young guys my age, and I could do anything they could do, and they could do anything I could do. So for the first time in the military, I became free up here,
That's right.
and figured I'm no different than anyone else. And so when I got out of the service, I wanted to go to college. And I knew I didn't have the grades to get into a 4-year college, so I went to a community college. And then while I was at the community college, and here's the importance of networking, to develop friendships and relationships. Take down the name, address, and telephone number of people that you know and want to keep in touch with. Because 10, 20 years later, they may do something for you, or you may do something for them, unexpectedly. Well, one of my teachers, an English teacher, I developed a relationship with by feeling natural. And she said, Julian, I think you ought to go to a 4-year college. Well, I'm thinking of going to UCLA. I think I can get into UCLA. And so she said, no, I think you ought to go to Pomona. Pomona, where's that? In Claremont. Claremont, where's that? And so she said, Pomona is very hard to get into, and it costs a lot of money. But I think, because she was a graduate, I think I can get the college to help you.
Wow.
You have some GI Bill rights, right? Yeah, as a veteran. And so she got my acceptance application to Pomona approved, and I went to Pomona College, where there were only 1,000 students, 600 boys and 400 girls, on purpose, so that since more boys than girls would go on to graduate school and not be able to get married, that would leave about an equal number for the girls. They had that on purpose, because the college relied on the gifts of graduates. And so learning was very hard at Pomona because all the students were very well prepared. And so then again, networks. I established a friendly relationship with a professor who said, you know, you ought to teach in college instead of high school. Oh, you think so? Yes, I think you would be a good college teacher. No one had ever told me that before. And so my ambitions had been gradually going up. And he said, I think you should go to Harvard. Harvard, what's that? And so, it's an excellent university, college and university in Massachusetts. Oh, yeah, come to think of it, maybe I've heard of Harvard. And he said, I will talk to them and see whether or not they would entertain your application. And I later learned that about 5,000 students apply for Harvard for every one they pick.
Exactly.
May not be that bad. It may be 4,000. And so, sure enough, I got a letter saying, we would be happy to have you come to Harvard.
Very, very impressive. Things to learn, right? Amazing, amazing story. We're learning so much. In 1967, the Congress of Mexican American Unity, which was a powerful organization at the time, encouraged you to run to become part of the school board, correct?
Yeah.
First of all, tell us a little bit about the Congress of the Mexican American Unity. I mean, my research showed that it was quite influential at the time, and then after time it just kind of fizzled. How did you get involved in that?
After the Second World War, there was an entire generation, I call it the GI generation, of veterans that were my age that had been greatly affected by service in the military. And we wanted to get things done. Different people wanted to get different things done. And the desire among World War II veteran Mexican Americans and blacks and others was to get ahead in life, since they were lucky to get back.
That's right.
Lucky to get back, so they wanted to get something done. And so blacks had persuaded Jews, Anglos, Latinos, and others in LA to get together to elect the first black to the school board in Los Angeles, Reverend James Jones. Great guy. And so board members in LA were elected at large throughout the county. And so it was a big, big office. And all these different groups contributed money, discouraged other individuals of that same group, like blacks, to run, thus splitting the vote. Mm-hmm. And so the first black was elected to the school board in Los Angeles. And the next 2 years, another group of board members run for office, and they communicated with Mexican American groups and said, why don't you folks get together and pick a candidate, and the rest of us will support that candidate. And
unity, right? Unity. What? That's wonderful, unity.
Right. And so about 92 Mexican American groups, athletic groups, academic groups, religious groups, different groups, 92 of them, got together at a church in East LA, and the Congress conducted a convention like a political campaign convention, where you came and you spoke. And I got nominated by that convention, which then got the approval and support of the black leadership, Jewish leadership, Anglo leadership, and Mexican American leadership, and that got me elected to the school board. And then 2 more times after that.
Yeah, that's very impressive. And one thing that the stroke, when I actually came across an audio of you speaking at some of those board meetings. And something that it was very impressive is that you had tremendous courage. You spoke so strongly of the things that you believe. You did not hold back on your beliefs in whichever subject you were talking about. And so that was very impressive to listen to. And of course, that courage and all the great things that you did during the time that you were in the Board of Education had contributed to all our lives, the consequences of all the fight that you did for the benefit of us. So that's very important. And of course, then, you got a call, unexpected call from Washington, and they were asking you to talk to the president, and you received some interesting news. Tell us about that.
Well, it's what reminds me. When you do what you're doing well, people learn about it. And unexpected opportunities arise. I was mowing the lawn in a hurry because I wanted to finish by the time the UCLA SC game began. Pat
who did you
yelled
root
out,
for?
"Julian, the telephone." I said, "God damn it." So I ran back into the garage where there's a telephone. And, "Hello?" And this person said, "Is this Professor Julian Nava?" I said, "No, it's Christopher Columbus. I don't want to buy anything." "Well, no, sir. Is your name Julian Nava?" "Yes, why?" And I said, "You caught me at a bad time. Why don't you call later?" And then he said, "Is your driver's license Z303064? "How did you get my driver license number?" And then he said, "And your Navy serial number is 5669745.
Now
Is
that
that
got
correct?"
you thinking.
I said, "That's my Navy number. You know that number like your birth date." And so I said, "I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do for you?" And then he said, "I'm calling from Washington, and I've been directed to tell you something. But if we discuss this, you must promise not to tell anyone about it." I said, "Anyone?" "Anyone. Not even my wife?" He said, "I said anyone." "All right. You have been nominated to become U.S. Ambassador to Mexico." Just like that. "What?" And he said, "You've been nominated among several others to become ambassador to Mexico. And if you are willing to be considered, you must tell me. And then I will send you some airplane tickets, and we want you back next week in Washington. And you must not tell anyone why you are going back." And so I said, "All right." And 3 days later, I got airplane tickets in the mail. And I told Pat that I had an unexpected lecturing opportunity, like tonight, in Washington, D.C. "Oh, well, all right, that happens every now and then." And so I went back and started going through a series of interviews with the State Department, some members of Congress, and the CIA. That was interesting. I was taken out to the CIA headquarters in Langley and went into the headquarters, and then no one was talking. And so a young man came up and asked me who I was, blah, blah, blah. So he went to an elevator, and then we went down about 4 stories. But I don't know exactly how many, but I just figured how long an elevator takes to go, because there were no labels on me. So we went down about 4 stories. And then he introduced me to another man, and then we went into a room, and then we talked for about an hour about Mexico, politics, and ideas. He was measuring me, I later learned. And then I was taken back to Washington, D.C., and then I came home. They sent me back home. And then about 4 days later, I got a telephone call. Would you please, Professor Nava, come to Washington, D.C.? And I came back to Washington, D.C., and they told me, you have been selected. And I later learned that President Carter had 3 names on his desk, one page. And he was obligated to pick one of the 3. Mm-hmm. And of the 3, he picked me. And I later learned that he had formed a committee of about 13 men, business, labor, education, self-employment, athletics, minority groups, men, women, about 13, to look at possible candidates for a given country for which there was an opening, and to pick 3 names, put them on his desk. And that's how the group came to include me among the 3. And President Carter did not expect me to pay a single dollar to get the appointment. Have you heard about the $1 million that the guy paid recently?
Oh yeah, currently, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, the going rate is $500,000, which a candidate gives to the party of the president, not to the president,
mine.
to the party of the president. But no one ever asked me for a dollar, because President Carter thought that was corrupt.
Boy, yeah.
And you should be selected on the basis of your qualifications.
And you were so qualified, and we are so proud of you. The very first Mexican-American ambassador to Mexico City. Very impressive, and we're very proud. Tell us a little bit about how it felt to arrive in Mexico City, a city with, the oldest city in the continent, of course, where your roots come from, Mexico, and meet the president right away and experience living in Mexico at a different level. I mean, as the ambassador of the United States. How was the whole experience?
Oh, well, that would take a little while. But
maybe a short version of that.
A short version. When I arrived to present the papers, 8 by 11 folder, with a nice cover, you arrive at the presidential palace in Mexico City, and everything is arranged. And then you go and you meet the president. And my older brother, Henry, and my wife, Pat, was with me. And I presented documents to the president of Mexico. And we spoke in Spanish. And he looked at my wife, who was blonde, green-eyed, and now she's not Mexican-American. Her surname is Lucas, so I kept telling her, you have some Hispanic people back there somewhere. Because Lucas is not an English surname. And so the president spoke to her in broken English. You speak some Spanish, Mrs. Nava? And she said, sí, desde luego, señor presidente. Si prefiere, podemos hablar en español. And so he kind of stood up and he said, you speak Spanish? And she said, yeah, sure. And so, well, where did you learn Spanish? And she said, well, my husband and I spent our first married year in Valladolid, Spain, where he taught. And he said, oh, no wonder your Spanish is so good, because that's in the heart of Castile, where they speak clean, pure Spanish, not like in Madrid, where it's kind of messy. And so he was so happy that the first Mexican-American ambassador to Mexico in anyone's memory had a wife who spoke Spanish.
I've heard that and one of the reasons why this is such a special thing for me, and I know for all of us, is that you always had this desire to be kind and to be inclusive to the people in Mexico. You mentioned to me in the past that you would go to restaurants with the special intention to be able to meet the local people and talk to them. And I know my great friend Jerry Velasco, who is present here today, the mayor of El Monte, he mentioned to me that how impressive it is that when people like him visited you, you took the time to actually have lunch with them, and so you were always trying to encourage and promote and help others grow and feel welcome and feel pride. And that's obviously, you're doing that today for us. You're giving us this great stories, this impressive career that you have had. So if you were to talk to your 12-year-old self, what advice would you give them? Somebody that wants to, maybe some of our friends here want to become ambassadors one day, and not specifically have to become an ambassador, but what are the things, what are the secrets to success, if we were to say that you could share with us?
Learn everything you can, which I've said to my own children. Study and learn everything that you can, because there's nothing that takes the place of education. Granted, money can, connections can to some extent,
but
not for
already.
90% of the population. It's your education.
I'm sorry.
And not just learning, it's knowing how to treat people. And that I learned from my mom and dad.
Yes.
Cómo tratar a la gente.
And you taught us also today that it's so important to create networks with people that you meet along the way, you know. And of course, you know, be kind and to others. And this is a great opportunity, because today amongst all of you, we have incredibly successful people, and you should all have the opportunity to meet them and to chat with them and to exchange numbers, because as Dr. Nava said, you never know 10 years from now, right? 10 years from now, you might want to give them a call. And now we know that you're retired and you enjoy life in San Diego with your lovely wife, Patricia. What are you excited about these days? What do you look forward? What do you want to share with us as your legacy to us?
Be proud of your cultural heritage. See it for what it is, an asset. Mexican Americans are a very complex people that don't usually understand their complexity. Going back to the Spanish side of our heritage, we are part German, some Scandinavian blood, Jewish blood, Sephardics, and Arabs. And over the 700 years that the Arabs occupied the Spanish peninsula, the intermarriage of these different groups came to comprise the Spaniards who discovered and settled America. And then when you add the Indian contribution, not all Indian groups were as cultured as the Aztecs or the Mayas,
right,
or the Incas.
For sure.
But we have a very rich, complicated genetic makeup. And we look like everybody else. There are blonde, blue-eyed people among us. There are people that are dark, people that have my complexion, a wide range. And so this helps explain why about a third of Mexican American youth marry outside their group. Because a lot of people, most people, don't know you're Mexican unless you make it obvious that you are. In spite of Trump, that pendejo will soon be gone. So he has brought us to the attention of all of the United States. But most people that know Mexican Americans think well of Mexican Americans, because we do not cause riots, turmoil. We don't burn down towns. And yet we have suffered discrimination of a more polite, but equally offensive and oppressive form. But you don't have to suffer that if you just don't want to. It's in our mind to be yourself.
Amazing words. You're so right, and we have so many reasons to be proud, and certainly one of the reasons to be proud is because you represent us, and we're so thankful for your time with us today. It's been amazing, right? It's been amazing, and we thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful time.